Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, on Tuesday, it's a tactical day. Going to be breaking down some hand histories with my co-host, John. How you doing, sir?
How's it going, Brad? Doing well. I'm pretty excited for these two hands. Like, more excited than usual. I think this is like a under talked about like tool or concept in poker. It's something that like I haven't really used until recently, or even like had like at the forefront of my mind while playing a hand until recently, which is why I try to pick this hand out from my recently played hands to talk about. So I was like, oh my god, I did it.
You did the thing. So what's the thing, right? What's the underutilized tool?
Inducing raises with very, very small bets when you have a good hand that wants to put 2 bets in, and this is, I think, just like a creative way to get 2 bets in when you have a really good hand and initiative.
Yeah, or 3 bets too.
Yeah, or 3 bets, yeah.
If the river is not all in. But yeah, so let's just break down this first hand. So I played this hand, I don't even know when. It's been forever ago, at the middle of last year at some point. It's a 2K&L. Spot where we go for the induction bet. And then John played his hand like 45 minutes ago. He was so excited that we had to do a Tactical Tuesday about it. So my hand starts out at 2K&L. The cutoff, everybody at the table is a reg, to my recollection. The cutoff opens to a little less than 2.5 BBs, so $45. We're 2K effective, so 100 big blinds. I 3-bet to 220 out of the big blind. Pretty standard stuff. I have the 10 of clubs, 10 of spades. Our opponent decides to call, and we see a flop. Flop is deuce of hearts, 5 of diamonds, 10 of diamonds. So we got the old top set going. There's 450 in the pot. I guess we'll start here with the flop decision. John, what do you think?
Okay, so pre-flop, everything looked totally standard. I think here on the flop, I would start with some sort of c-bet. I think you can just c-bet range on this flop, honestly, for like 1/3 pot. I think you can have a slightly bigger sizing here and do some like half pot and checking. So I think there are lots of different strategies you can take, but with this hand, I would certainly be looking to bet the flop for some size at least.
Yeah, and because we have top set specifically, decided to go smaller, like the third size, or 30%. So I bet 134 to 450, and our opponent decides to call. The turn is the ace of spades, and there's 718 in the pot. I have 1700 behind, and villain has us covered by a couple $100. So really, here on the turn, what do you think now?
I think this turn is interesting for a bunch of reasons, but I think that just my general strategy on this ace of spades turn is either going to be to bet small with like a small tiny value portion of my range, but I think the simplest strategy is just to check range on the turn.
Yeah, I do end up checking the turn. I thought that, I mean, basically, I thought the ace gives me a lot of like single pair, top pair, weak kicker type hands that start going into like check mode on the turn. I thought it like just really, it's hard to get called 3 streets if you have like the ace 4 or the ace tray by worse hands. So decided to check, and our opponent unfortunately checks behind. Anything that you can make villain's decision here to check behind on the turn?
Yeah, I think we can immediately start. Well, okay, so I would immediately view this check behind as an indication of some sort of showdown value. It can be anywhere from like really, really weak showdown value. I think like a hand like pocket sixes could call a 3-bet and definitely call a small bet on the flop. I think that hands like that would check back. I think all their 10x is likely to check back.
Yeah.
I think again, I think like a lot of their draws are going to be really tempted to bet, or a lot of like their floats on the flop, like Queen Jack of Hearts or something like that, is going to be really, really tempted to start stabbing here. I also think that they're really strong value, so like a set of fives or a set of deuces or maybe a hand like ace 10 is also
Or a
gonna
set
be
of aces if they decide to flat.
yeah, they could have a set of aces. Those really strong hands are going to be really tempted to bet the turn as well. So I think when they do check back, I'm just assigning them some sort of marginal to weak showdown value range.
Yeah, like basically mostly bluff catchers.
Yep,
right?
yep, exactly.
And I, in game, even though this was like 9 months ago, I have to imagine I thought the same. And the river is the 8 of clubs. And like I said, there's 17 in the pot. The final board is 10-5 deuce was the flop. Turn is an ace. River's an 8. There's no flush available. I have 1,700, and there's 718 in the pot. So we know what I do because of the theme of this episode. But before we get to my action, I will ask for your river analysis.
So I used to think, I think I used to be like too primitive in my thinking about these spots, where I would be like, oh, this guy has showdown, or like a bluff catcher. Okay, let's make him bluff catch for like the max on the river with his pocket nines or weak ace X or 10X or jacks or whatever he checks back on the flop. Like since we know he has a bluff catcher, like let's just try to make those hands bluff catch for as much money as I think they'll, be able to put it on the river. Yeah, I think that's the way that I used to think. I think that's generally the way people think about these spots. But I think that there's a better path forward.
Yes, they know what the better path is. It's literally the title of the episode, or at least the path that I took. The reason that I took the path of betting small was because, and I do remember having this thought in game, was I did not. So basically, when you put when you use a small bet against bluff catchers, they're kind of either forced to raise or fold. So like I wanted to basically tempt the in position player here by using a small sizing in a spot where they feel I'm unlikely to use a small sizing if I have like a strong value hand, and I have a wide availability of marginal value bets, right? Like I could marginally value bet kings or queens or jacks, king 10, ace tray, ace 4, any ace really, any suited ace, ace 9, ace 8, ace 7, whatever. So I have like a high availability of like marginal value bets, and also a portion of my range that they feel I'm likely going to size up with. And so because of that, like I decided to choose the small bet to induce a raise from villains like, their worst bluff catchers.
Yeah, I think that I agree that is now my opinion. That is my opinion. That's the best way forward. I think there's some things that we should like sort of caveat before like just telling people to like do this. I think the one important thing is kind of the skill level of your opponent in the spot. Like it needs to be a pretty good player, I think, for this play to be worth it. Like someone who's going to recognize that you are likely betting for thin value. Also someone who's like aggressive enough to go for that river raise with, whatever bluff catcher that they're now turning into a bluff. And I think like maybe one reason I'm not as like in tune with thinking this way is because I don't know if this works as well at like 100 and L as it does at like 1K and L. Like I don't think that the regs are perceptive enough or are like aggressive enough to make betting small and trying to induce better than betting a larger size and just trying to get bluff caught by their bluff catches. So those are the two things that I was going to add.
Yeah, I think there's another condition here, and that's not in play in this specific hand, but yeah, I've been deploying the induction bet for a while now in both live and online. I think it's just a thing that you should do. The other sort of scenario that happens where I like the induction bet a lot is when opponent has a deficit of strong value hands and also doesn't have a lot of bluff catchers. So basically their range is like mostly air balls.
Okay.
And that's something that, you know, I think the listener can deploy live, where villain just typically they're going to be out of position too. So like they check the river, they just have a busted everything, and you just put out like a little chum in the water to entice them to raising, right? It's almost like they don't have the thought or idea of raising until they see that bet. And then, you know, you can almost see the light bulb go off over their head, like in real time. And they're like, oh, wait, I have another option here. I can just raise.
It's like poker inception. You plant this idea
basically
in their mind and then
plant the idea. So yeah, I think that's the other condition, really. But
really, it's just bait. It's like sticking this little piece of fish out there. And hey.
Yeah, like, don't you want to win the pot? Here's a little chance, buddy.
Chomp on this.
But yeah, it should be used somewhat seldomly, but when the right conditions present themselves, yeah, it can be pretty effective. So in game, in this specific hand at 2K and L, I bet a third on the river, so 214 and 718. My opponent just rips, and we call, obviously, with a set of 10s, and they have the pocket trays. So turn their weak bluff catcher into a bluff, which, yeah, worked out pretty nicely. To be fair, though, for the listener too, this situation was like kind of perfect. I have a database full of situations that were somewhat similar where this shit did not work out in the way that I had planned. So yeah, you have to be very careful. It's a fine line when you're trying to induce a river raise, because there are some specific players and some specific player profiles that just, they don't take the bait, and when they raise, like, you get more than you bargained for. You basically land jaws and try to reel it into the boat, you know? So after the break, we're going to look at Jon's hand and see what happened and why he's so excited. So
it's
stick
actually,
around.
I think it's less. Oh, I shouldn't say that. But anyways, last thing I want to say was that if this was me, you know, a couple weeks ago, I would have just bet big on the river and threes probably fold, and, you know, like, I just never look at the hand again or whatever.
Yeah, I do my best to set up the second hand, and Jon just like harpoons it right through the heart. Like, don't you could just turn Tactical Tuesday off. Don't even bother sticking around for the next hand. I think, right?
No, you've heard all the good stuff already.
In a world where a fish donk bets the flop, and you don't know what to do, one man,
Coach Brad Wilson,
has a surefire plan to neutralize flop leads and rip that dunk to shreds. Nuffle. Available now. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com/nuffle. Rated R.
All right, welcome back from the break. We have an unprecedented situation that is going down. So this is actually the second time that me and Jon are going to go through this lackluster hand, but that's because my computer ran out of hard drive space nearing the end of the first one. And so what's unprecedented is the YouTube audience is going to see a totally separate video and hear totally different audio than the podcast listener. And I've been wanting to do this for a while, but I just want you to know, YouTube listener, you're by far my favorite. Sexy. You're just better than the podcast listener in all aspects of life. So give yourself a pat on the back. Don't tell the podcast listener that I told you this. Strictly confidential. Jon, let's break down this hand for the second time here.
How long have you been holding that in? That's what I want to know. Ever since the
I've-
YouTube episode started going up.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I've had to like just bury my emotions. But finally we get a chance, and they'll never know. Those silly podcast listeners, they'll never ever know what happened.
All right, so we'll start out. We'll get into this hand. Starts with a reg who is under the gun. He's playing 24, 27 and a half. I know the podcast listeners can't see the full stats.
Yeah, suck on that, podcast listener. We don't even have to break down the action. Why don't we just play the hand out and not even say anything?
Yeah, so the flop is this. I have this hand. And
Yeah, we don't have to do that, John. We don't have to do that. They can see what the flop is and what our hand is. But you bet, right?
oh, sorry. I'll just say
where
that.
are we? We went all the way.
Yeah. So under the gun, a reg opens. I defend king 6 of hearts and the big blind. The flop is 7-6 deuce rainbow. I check the flop. Reg checks back.
God, this is going too fast.
The turn is another 6, and I decide to probe turn for a large size here. I guess just to recap what we said in the previous recording, Brad thinks that going pot or even larger than 3/4, which is the size that I picked, is completely reasonable, given that the bluff catchers that check back the flop are likely going to be inelastic between 75% and 100% pot. Like ace jack or ace highs are just going to call pot. Over pairs that check back the flop are just going to call pot. So when I do have a value hand and I think that they're inelastic, I should be going for the big size. But in real life, I do bet 3/4 and get called. The river is a deuce, which double pairs the board and gives me a boat. This is a spot where previously, like similar to the last hand, I think I would have just bet big a couple weeks ago and just, been trying to get value from like their ace highs and their overpairs that I think are going to bluff catch for a big size. Again, I think because they check back the flop, they have more bluff catchers in their range than normal. But I resisted that urge to bet big and went for a teeny tiny size. I think somewhere between 1/3 and 25% pot, if I remember correctly. Trying to either get raised by some of their bluffs. Maybe they have some like club hands that check back the flop, like a hand like ace jack of clubs or something
Doubtful.
like that. I don't know. Maybe not. But there are some, some weaker hands and I think like the biggest, my bigger intention here with this small size was basically to make the under the gun reg think that, I'm thin value betting some sort of hand, maybe some sort of like 7x or maybe a hand like pocket eights or something like that. And they either get greedy with their value and try to raise to get some of those hands to call, or they get become like too tempted with their bluff catchers or some of their air and see the small size and just pounce on it and raise as a bluff.
Yeah. What's surprising about this is you don't see this door. This is like the first time you've seen the door, which is why you wanted to do this theme.
Mm-hmm.
And you also are very prone to like turning a pair into a bluff here.
Yeah.
That's like that. That's interesting. I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
Again, not going to hear this on the podcast, but you turn bluffs when you turn pairs into bluffs when you see this sizing, and yet did not see the door until only recently.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just to add on, just to pile on, but like I think like
that could be your framing, right? To see it in the future is like, would I turn a pair into a bluff here? And if so, maybe it's a good spot to induce.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's funny. Like in this spot, I was really mostly thinking of this spot in terms of like, oh, I want him to think that I have 7x and either blow me off my hand or raise for value. Like that was much more at the forefront of my mind than like, maybe he has 5s or 4s and doesn't think he can call this and decides to turn it into a bluff or something.
When they
like
check
that.
back the flop, a lot of times they have a bluff catcher.
Right. Yeah.
And they may have overpairs, but I think it's way less likely. And more likely they have like, the ace queens, ace jacks,
Pocket
ace
fives,
kings,
fours.
5s, 4s, trays.
Yeah.
They could have like ace deuce or something too.
What would be really brutal here, I think, is if like they just have a lot of weak 7x that checks back the flop. Then I'm actually just not getting raised by any of their 7x when I bet this size, which is a little sad.
That would be sad. Yeah. But c'est la vie. I mean, actually, if you use a small sizing, you could possibly. I just realized that they have 2 combos of ace deuce that could maybe try to raise for thin value.
Yeah, that's definitely like one of the easier value raises that they would have for sure.
Yeah. And one they would for sure take, and they go for it. They do raise for value, and you decided to click it back. I think preferably I would go to like 600 or something like that. You tried to layer on another induction raise on top of your induction bet, so just the next level of inception here. If they clicked it, would you click it again? Are we like how far down the rabbit hole do
how
you
many
go?
clicks?
Yeah.
I don't think.
Then eventually they just have quads.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be able to click it again. Like, I think I bet 32. He makes it 168, and I click it to like 300, a little bit over 300. I think if he made it like, if he made it like the 430 or whatever, I would just call it and be like, I'm not getting stacked by 7-6 or some crazy pocket deuces that flatted the flop, or like, pocket sevens that did some crazy trap check on the flop. Like, not gonna risk it, just gonna call. It almost happened, I think, like, because you can run the tape like a little bit more, but like I bet he raises and then I click it back, and then in this spot he just tanks all the way down, and I was like, oh my god, he's gonna do it, he's gonna put it in with air. But alas, he just folds.
He didn't. Did you try to send your energy his way through the World Wide Web?
Oh, I tried harder than that. I was like talking to the monitor, like, hey man, you can do it, it's gonna get through. I don't have anything, I know you don't have anything, which means you should just put it in.
Yeah, you need to plug in. You need like fiber optic connection to the internet to send your energy out there.
Yeah. Next time I'll try it and hopefully it'll work. But this time he ended up folding I think ace jack offsuit.
Yeah. As a little aside, there was a while where I don't know what is wrong. Like, human beings, I think, are just inherently not made to play poker, and there's something wrong with them. But like, whenever I would go all in on the river, like, for some reason, I just wouldn't. I would refuse to reload before the result, because I was like, I don't know, maybe they'll know.
Oh my god.
maybe they'll know I clicked that reload button. Can't do anything. Have to stay perfectly still. I'm
the opposite. I'm the actual opposite of that. Like, anytime I bluff the river for my stack, I snap reload like right after the money goes into the pot. Man.
It's bad luck, man. Bad
Shows
luck.
a lack of confidence in your
It's bad luck. You just can't do that. All right. Well, thanks for listening. And before we close here, Coach Thomas did send me a message on Slack saying that we should break down the Garrett and Rampage hand, and I just wanted to release a brief statement. And Rampage, you played the hand well, and I don't think there should be any controversy with your 4-5 of hearts. Keep putting the money in the pot there, sir.
Yeah. When he had 4-5 of hearts and Garrett turned the straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yo.
Yeah, I thought that was. Yeah.
What could we talk about? We talked about the hand as much as we would have in a Tactical Tuesday. It would have been like 27 seconds long, and we would have said, yeah, well played by both parties, and now let's move on and play the next hand.
Yep. I totally agree. I don't think that was a punt at all from Rampage. I think that's just it's totally fine.
That's another bonus that you get for listening or watching the video on YouTube. We didn't give that information away on the podcast. Yeah. So
all those podcast listeners running around thinking that Rampage punted.
Yeah. What idiots. Oh boy. All right. Well, canceled by my own audience.
What audience? Like, you killed them yourself.
Called my audience idiots. The downfall of CPG. All right, John. Anything left to add this week's show?
See you next week. Oh wait, actually, let's just hit play real quick so we can just.
Oh yeah, they have run it all the way to the end.
Yeah. So I click it back and he raises, or sorry, he folds and just he ends up having ace of clubs, jack of spades.
Yeah, which does indicate that they thought they didn't have any showdown value.
Right.
Because you bet small. because ace high is a decent bluff catcher. So mission accomplished. Well done. You already said to see you next week. Sorry that it'll just be, you and the podcast listener, one episode moving forward. But we had this moment at this time in the sun. Let's enjoy it. See you next Tuesday.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter, join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter @CPG Podcast.